Now here's an observation. One person alone can achieve a lot of things. But what's equally true is that one person alone can only do so much. This is a truth that I puzzled about when I was little, about human limitations. But of course not in a deep philosophical way. I did it in my childish way. When I was little, before I fell asleep in bed, I'd try to hold in my head a picture of everything that might be going on everywhere at that particular time. And everywhere was Woodley Estate, where we lived then. A map-like representation of stick figures in vivid primary colors would form in my mind. I'd see the neighbor dad driving in his Citroën, as we called it. Apparently the correct pronunciation is Citroën. And in a nearby street, the dogs would be roaming. And in the rows of bungalows that populated our neighborhood, some lights would be off and families asleep. And some would be on with families huddled around the TV. I was trying to hold in my mind, in one mental grasp, a picture of everything that was going on. I was trying to be all-knowing. I was trying to be omniscient. Of course, I discovered later that only God can be that. I was limited. But much as I loved the big picture, I also loved to understand things in detail, in specificity, in particular. When I was in Kilimani in class 3, there was a boy in my class called Jerry, Canadian. Jerry had this wonderful set of colored pencils and felt pens and a geometric box that I envied. And he would draw these intricate circles overlapping and form rosettes that he would then color in with pinks and blues and purples and greens. Beautiful, impressive. And so I asked Jerry, I said, "How do you do that?" And he wouldn't show me. But I watched him keenly. And borrowing the geometric set of an older sibling, a brother or a sister, I think it was, one day at home, I managed to draw a rosette. And I took it back to school. And I showed it to Jerry. And he went pink with fury, because he wasn't the only one who could draw a rosette. You know, this idea of processing reality by focus pulling between the micro and the macro, between the logical and the creative, between the material and the spiritual, between the big picture and the detail, is the way that I approach life. It's the way that I try to understand the world. 15 years ago, the opportunity came to start an art center. I had just recently returned from Australia, where my husband and I had been living with our 2 daughters, and where I had been involved in various programs, one of them a youth program in the performing arts. And returning to Nairobi, I started something similar. And a year of running this, I heard about a funder who was willing to give money to support nonprofits in media and arts. So I joined the conversation. I made applications, and I joined the conversation that had started around putting together a common space, a common compound with pooled resources, shared resources for artists. Because, of course, many artists were applying for these funds. And I hoped that I could be one of the small programs that would be part of this compound. This space eventually became the Godown Arts Center. But apart from learning how a community can come together to share resources, a community of artists, I think one of the insights for me was how, in order to create something bigger, something's got to give. Something smaller has got to give. And in this case, the Godown, it was really a balance between shared responsibility and autonomy, a balance between independent activity and collaboration or collaborative activities. But more than anything else for me, it was the recognition that I would have to stop my program and commit fully to establishing the Godown. So that is what I did. Now, some of you may be thinking, if this story keeps going this way, it's not going to be very interesting. Sounds like how to start an arts center. And you're probably sort of saying, when are you going to hear about joy, the juicy bits? To be honest with you, I found it difficult to figure out the approach for this Engage event. So I asked some folks at the office, I said, what would you like to hear me say? What do you think I should say? And I got some feedback and some responses, and somebody said, well, just tell your journey. 12, 15 minutes that we have to talk here. I'm 57 years old. Okay, I'll try. Somebody else said, well, talk about musically speaking. How was that? What was your music like? What were the 90s like? Sounds like a long time ago, doesn't it? And then somebody said, how is it for you being a woman? Talk about that. And others said, well, what about your personal style? What about your hair? So the hair is easy. I will tell you that story, and I'll tell you quickly because there's nothing complicated about it. So this is not a mohawk or a Mohican. If you think it is, it's not. Nor is it Tucana style, because that's not what I intended when I cut my hair this way. Nor is it Mario Balotelli, as one immigration officer at Schiphol Airport once inquired of me. And it's not an act of rebellion. It's actually a very practical choice. You see, I have very poor hair on the sides of my head, and more promising growth in the middle. And many years ago, tired of these perpetual weekly visits to the hair salon, I said, why don't I just get rid of the bad hair and keep the good hair? And this is the result. But back to the Godown. You know, when the Godown was starting, there was a very strong sense that it would be a short-lived experiment. You know, for a long time, artists in this country have been shortchanged. They're wary, they're skeptical, because society, parents, families, and policymakers have not treated them well. So they approach promises and new ideas carefully. And this is the way it was when the Godown began. I remember one artist coming to me and saying, Joy, I give this thing 2 years max. And of course I can understand why. But others were less generous and said, Joy, you're eating money. The donors are favoring you. So I made some decisions. But I'll get to that in a moment. Somebody asked me a very important question. You know, sometimes you work in the arts so long, and I've been in this business for 30 years plus, that we make the assumption that people know what it is that we do and why we do it. So somebody said, well, what does a day at the Godown look like? Now, here's what a day at the Godown looks like. Artists and their managers and the administrators arrive at 9, and they open their offices. And in a music studio, a studio engineer will begin to prepare for a band that is about to come and record. And maybe a few doors down, some model makers are sketching caricatures of well-known personalities who will then be cast into puppets that you will see in the XYZ show. By mid-morning, a busload of students has arrived at Godown, and somebody from our front office will tour them round to the visual artists in the back, where they'll get a chance to meet and speak with real artists in their space. And as lunchtime rolls along, professionals from the businesses that surround the Godown will come in to eat some matumbo and some samaki from Mama Doreen's place at the Godown. And then in the afternoon, maybe some dancers will now get onto the dance floors, rehearsing for something that they might be presenting in a month's time or 2 months' time. It takes time for them to create these things. And meanwhile, in our office, some of our staff are probably discussing and getting ready for a music concert that's happening at the end of the month. And others might be preparing for a class that we'll be giving to artist entrepreneurs in the evening. That is life at the Godown. Work is going on. So I made some decisions. And the first decision I made was about money. We're Kenyans. We know the story. Money can so get in the way of vision. Money can so blind us to seeing all of the other assets and talents and values that we can use to move us forward. So I decided, 2 years into running the Godown, that I would not take a salary. And since then, I've not been on benefits or salary from the Godown. But the other decision I made around money was that as an organization, we would be financially transparent. We would file our returns. We would be audited. We would be accountable. Now, the second important decision that I made requires a bit of a backstory. You see, I'm a born town, for those of you who are born here. I was born in Ofafa Maringo, just before independence. And I have recollections of being carried on somebody's back, piggybacked by, I think, my eldest brother. And that we're in a field, and there is celebration and noise going on. And I think this might have been independence celebrations, 63, perhaps 64. And then a random recollection there that I'm holding a bun in my hand. But you know, this city is the source of my formative associations and my memories. This city is home for me. When I get old, I will be old in this city. And in fact, many of us will be old in this city because the reality is that 50% of Kenyans, come 2050, will be living in cities and towns. And some of the work that we've been doing at the Godown has really led me to understand and appreciate this city. And one of them is a festival that we run. It's called the Nainihu Festival. Some of you may know it. Actually, it's on right now. This festival is really the people's festival. It is curated by Nairobi residents themselves. And through the festival, I have come to really appreciate the diversity of this city and the wonderful people in this city. Through the festival, I've come to know Uba and her cousin Abdullahi, who run the walking tours in Isli. They introduced us to camel milk tea. I've also gotten to know Moha and Munde from Kamkunji, who will tour you through the Juakali sheds and the Bama food markets of meat and fish and chicken and eggs and milk. And then there's Maureen and Siama from Kibra, or Chocolate City as they call it, who will take you through craft tours in Kibera and also tell you the stories of the original members of that community, the Nubians. And there's Irungu and Constant from Kilimani, who have a very robust resident association that does some fantastic work. So this city and its assets are wonderful and marvelous. The people are warm and animated and funny and hardworking. And this is the reason why we made the second key decision, which is to focus our activities around the city and to begin to build a vision of our relationship with the city of Nairobi, that the Arts Center and art and culture to have a meaningful and symbiotic relationship with the city and with the people of the city. So the Godown has embarked on a new vision. It's a vision that says that an art center is not only a space for creative people and for artists, but also a cultural anchor for residents, reflecting their diversity, mirroring their ever-evolving identities. The new Godown that we imagine is a place that will be 5 or 6 or 7 times what it is today. It will have public amenities, a library, a small museum, art labs for children and youth, and of course it will continue to service and support artists themselves. This vision is anchored in the potential and the possibilities that we have seen in the people of Nairobi. But as I said in the beginning, one person alone can achieve a lot, but they can only do so much. It is the same with the Godown. Alone, as an organization, to realize this vision, we can only do so much. We need all of our efforts together to bring into realization the first cultural investment in infrastructure since the building of the Kenya National Theatre before independence. It is that historic. It is that important. And we have the potential to do this. The campaign to rebuild the Godown has been up and running since December. And some of you may have seen it on our social media pages. The hashtag is Godown Transforms. The Godown staff and board have over the last 10 years been saving the small amounts of money that artists pay to use the space. And in that period of time, we have a reserve of $1 million. We are asking you, the public, ordinary people, not the big philanthropists, not the corporates, not the government, not the big international funders and the donors, but you, the public, you, the ordinary people, to match that $1 million. How? By giving what you can. It is the numbers that will count. And so we have fixed a baseline of 200,000 people to help us match that first million that the Godown has raised. And that is my appeal to you. I am inviting you to join the Godown Transformation Campaign. Will you join us? Please. Thank you.